The unexpected god. The battle on Zephyr Prime was supposed to be just another chapter in the long and bloody war between the human resistance and the Rian Empire. Darren Morales, a seasoned soldier, found himself on the front lines once again, facing an overwhelming force of Rian warriors. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the acrid smoke of plasma fire. Darren's muscles burned as he fought to hold his ground, but a sudden burst of enemy fire tore through his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain seared through his body as he clutched at the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Surrounded by enemy forces, Darren knew his time was up. He had seen too many of his comrades fall to the ruthless Rian soldiers. But as he lay there, bracing himself for the end, something strange happened. Instead of delivering the fatal blow, the Rian warriors hesitated. They exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable beneath their helmets, before one of them barked an order. Darren was lifted onto a stretcher and carried away from the battlefield. When Darren awoke, he found himself in an opulent chamber, far removed from the chaos of battle. His wounds had been expertly treated, and a lavish feast had been laid out before him. The sudden shift from the hellish battlefield to this place of comfort and luxury was jarring. Darren struggled to make sense of his situation, but before he could gather his thoughts, the door to the chamber swung open, and a tall, imposing figure entered. Emperor Kazan, ruler of the Rian Empire, regarded Darren with a calculating gaze. "You must be wondering why you're here," the Emperor said, his voice cold and commanding. "You, a human soldier, have been chosen for a very special purpose." Darren's mind raced. What could the Emperor possibly want with him? He was just a soldier, one among thousands. But as the Emperor continued to speak, Darren's confusion only deepened. "The Rian people have developed a peculiar custom," Kazan explained. "They believe that humans possess a unique power, a divine power that can influence the outcome of battles. Ever since a chance victory following the blessing of a captured human crew, my soldiers have come to see your kind as gods. They pray to you before battles, seeking your guidance and protection." Darren stared at the Emperor in disbelief. This had to be some kind of sick joke. But the Emperor's expression remained serious, his eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and malice. "You, Darren Morales, have been selected to be our battle god. You will advise my troops, offer them your divine wisdom, and lead them to victory." The absurdity of the situation struck Darren like a punch to the gut. He had been captured, not as a prisoner of war, but as a deity. The Rian soldiers, his enemies, were looking to him for guidance in their conquest. The very idea was ludicrous, but as he looked into the Emperor's eyes, he realized that this was no joke. His life, and the lives of countless others, now hung in the balance. As the days passed, Darren was paraded before the Rian troops, who knelt before him, offering prayers and sacrifices. The high priest, Draco, urged Darren to provide divine tactical advice, treating his every word as gospel. At first, Darren resisted, offering only the most basic military suggestions in the hopes of minimizing the damage. But to his horror, these simple strategies were hailed as miraculous insights, leading the Rians to a series of decisive victories. News of the battle god spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Darren's name became synonymous with divine power, and Emperor Kazan quickly capitalized on this, making Darren the permanent spiritual advisor to the Rian Armada. Trapped in his role as an unwilling god, Darren watched in helpless frustration as the Rian Empire expanded its grip on the galaxy, all the while struggling to find a way to sabotage the rituals and expose the absurdity of the custom. But the more Darren tried to resist, the more his legend grew. He became a symbol of hope and power to the Rian soldiers, and his influence over the mighty Rian military became harder to escape. An ordinary human soldier, now revered as a god, held the fate of billions in his shackled hands. The battle for the galaxy had begun, and Darren knew that if he was to save humanity and the countless worlds under Rian control, he would need to play his role carefully, using his newfound influence to outwit the empire that worshipped him. Seeds of rebellion. As Darren's fame as the Rian's battle god grew, so did Emperor Kazan's reliance on his divine tactical insights. The Emperor summoned Darren to the war room aboard the Imperial battleship Karanak, where the Empire's top military minds gathered to plan their next conquest. Darren, now dressed in ceremonial robes that marked him as a deity, found himself seated at the Emperor's right hand, a place of honor that felt more like a prison. Admiral Zavos, the ship's proud and ruthless commander, bristled at the sight of Darren. Zavos had always been skeptical of the battle god myth, and his disdain for the human captive was barely concealed. "Your Majesty," Zavos began, his voice dripping with contempt, "I propose a direct assault on the rebel stronghold on Nox Prime, a show of overwhelming force to crush their resistance once and for all." Darren studied the holographic map of the jungle moon, recalling his basic training in siege tactics. Nox Prime was heavily fortified, its terrain offering natural defenses that would make a frontal assault costly and inefficient. Darren knew that the Rians had the firepower to overwhelm the rebels, but the losses would be staggering. If he was to protect as many lives as possible, he needed to speak up. "If I may, Emperor," Darren ventured cautiously, "a frontal attack could lead to heavy losses. The rebels are well entrenched. Perhaps if we cut off their supply lines, we could starve them out with minimal casualties." Kazan stroked his chin, considering Darren's suggestion. The Emperor had come to trust Darren's advice, seeing it as a sign of divine favor. "The battle god speaks wisdom," Kazan declared, his voice echoing through the war room. "We shall besiege Nox Prime and watch the rebels wither on the vine." Zavos's face contorted with barely concealed rage as the other commanders nodded in agreement. The Admiral's eyes burned with hatred as he realized that Darren, a mere human, had once again influenced the course of the war. But there was nothing Zavos could do. The Emperor's word was law. The siege of Nox Prime proved to be a masterstroke. The rebel base fell within a matter of weeks, its defenders weakened by starvation and dwindling supplies. The reinforcements suffered minimal casualties, and Kazan hailed Darren's divine wisdom as the key to their victory. To reward his oracle, the Emperor installed Darren in a lavish suite within the Imperial Palace on Imperialis, the Rian capital world. Darren lived like a king, attended by a legion of servants and concubines, but he knew he was nothing more than a prisoner in a gilded cage. It was during one of the many feasts held in his honor that Darren first met Princess Ilara, the Emperor's enigmatic daughter. Ilara was unlike anyone Darren had ever encountered. Her violet eyes sparkled with curiosity as she leaned in to whisper to him, "Tell me, battle god, what is life like on your distant Earth?" Over the following weeks, Ilara's visits to Darren's quarters became a regular occurrence. They spoke of their respective worlds, marveling at the differences and similarities between human and Rian culture. Ilara was fascinated by Earth, a planet she had only heard of in stories, and Darren found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. But as their clandestine friendship blossomed, Ilara began to confide in Darren her growing doubts about the Empire's superstitious ways. "My father uses these battle god rituals to control the masses," she said one evening, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Fear and blind faith, not loyalty, keep his subjects in line." Darren saw an opportunity to plant the seeds of rebellion in Ilara's mind. "On Earth, we believe that all sentient beings have the right to freedom and self-determination," he said softly, watching her eyes widen at the alien concept. "Your people deserve more than to live in fear of a god that doesn't exist." Their budding alliance was threatened when Commander Korax, Admiral Zavos's loyal spy, discovered their secret meetings. Korax reported his findings to Zavos, who saw a chance to eliminate his hated rival once and for all. "This human snake has used his dark magic to bewitch the princess," Zavos accused, pointing a clawed finger at the astonished Darren before Emperor. "Kazan's throne. He must be sacrificed to appease the war gods and cleanse our empire of his foul influence." Kazan's eyes narrowed as superstitious paranoia warred with practical need in his mind. For a long moment, the Emperor seemed torn between his fear of losing Darren's tactical brilliance and the pressure from his advisors to maintain the rituals that held his empire together. At last, Kazan's fear won out. "Seize him," Kazan commanded, his voice cold as the void. "Prepare the ceremonial altar." As the Imperial Guard dragged Darren from the throne room, he caught a glimpse of Princess Ilara's stricken face. In her eyes, he saw the glimmer of a desperate plan taking shape. Darren could only pray that Ilara's scheme, whatever it might be, would spare him from the sacrificial blade. The fate of the Empire and the galaxy hung in the balance as the reluctant battle god and the disillusioned princess prepared to make their stand against the forces of superstition and tyranny. The princess's gambit Darren's heart pounded as the Imperial Guard dragged him toward the ceremonial altar. The cold stone slab loomed before him, stained with the blood of countless sacrifices. High Priest Draco stood by, his expression one of grim satisfaction as he raised the obsidian blade, its edge glinting in the harsh light of the throne room. Darren struggled against his bonds, but the guards held him fast, forcing him down onto the altar. "Wait!" Princess Ilara's voice rang out, silencing the assembled crowd. She strode forward, her violet eyes blazing with purpose. "Father, this is madness. The human is no god, and this custom is nothing but a sham." Emperor Kazan's brow furrowed as he regarded his daughter. "Ilara, you dare interrupt the sacred rite?" "I dare speak the truth," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "If this man truly possessed divine powers, would he not have struck us down already? This battle god nonsense is merely a tool to keep our people in line through fear and superstition." High Priest Draco's face contorted with rage. "Heresy! Your Majesty, we must proceed with the sacrifice to appease the war gods." Admiral Zavos nodded in agreement, his voice dripping with venom. "The princess has clearly been corrupted by the human's influence. We cannot allow this blasphemy to stand." Kazan's eyes darted between his daughter and his advisors, indecision written across his face. For a long, tense moment, the Emperor appeared torn. Then, with a raised hand, he commanded, "Hold! Return the human to his chambers under heavy guard. I must consider this matter further." As the guards escorted Darren back to his gilded prison, he caught a glimpse of Ilara's face. A barely perceptible nod passed between them, a silent promise of more to come. Hours later, Darren paced his chamber, every muscle tense as he awaited his fate. The door slid open, revealing Princess Ilara. She quickly stepped inside, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "We don't have much time," she whispered urgently. "I've arranged for a ship in the palace hangar. We must expose this deception and bring down my father's regime." Darren nodded grimly, his resolve hardening. "Lead the way." They crept through the palace's winding corridors, ducking into alcoves to avoid patrolling guards. As they neared the hangar bay, a shout rang out behind them. "Halt! By order of the Emperor!" Commander Korax emerged from the shadows, flanked by a squad of Imperial guards. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Darren and Ilara dove for cover. Darren's military training kicked in, and he rolled behind a pillar, snatching up a fallen guard's weapon. With practiced precision, he returned fire, downing 2 guards in quick succession. Ilara blasted the hangar bay controls, the massive doors groaning open. "This way!" she called, sprinting toward a sleek scout craft. Darren provided covering fire as they raced aboard the ship. His fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, bringing the engines online. The Zephyr lifted off just as Korax and his men stormed into the hangar. Capital! Imperial fighters screamed in pursuit, plasma bolts streaking past the cockpit. Darren's mind raced as he pushed the Zephyr to its limits, weaving through the dense cityscape. A crazy idea struck him. The asteroid belt. It's our only chance. He angled the ship toward the planet's ring of debris, plunging into the swirling chaos of rock and ice. The Imperial fighters hesitated, unwilling to risk the treacherous course. As they emerged on the other, "Hold on," Darren shouted as he piloted the craft through the towering spires of the Imperial side. Momentarily safe, Ilara let out a shaky breath. "We made it." "Set a course for Nexus Prime," she instructed, her voice steely with determination. "There's something there we need to find." Hours later, the Zephyr limped into orbit around a desolate, crater-pocked moon. Scans revealed a single structure, a sprawling underground complex. Darren guided their craft to a gentle landing near the facility's entrance. As they donned environment suits, Ilara briefed him on their target. The Archive of Forbidden History, she explained. If there's information about the true origins of the battle god myth, it's here. They approached a towering door of corroded metal, its surface etched with intricate glyphs. Darren examined the locking mechanism, a maze of ancient circuitry. Pretty advanced for something so old, he muttered, pulling tools from his belt. This might take a while. After an hour of careful work, bypassing fail-safes and rerouting power, the massive portal ground opened with a screech of protesting metal. Stale air rushed out as Darren and Alara stepped into darkness. Their helmet lights illuminated shelves upon shelves of data crystals and crumbling scrolls stretching into the shadows. "We need to find records from the early Imperial era," Alara said, scanning labels. There, that section. They pored over historical accounts, piecing together a chilling picture. Darren's stomach churned as he read reports of captured soldiers subjected to horrific torture, forced to confess supernatural powers. "Your ancestors were monsters," he said quietly, the words heavy with sorrow and anger. Ilara's face was ashen behind her faceplate. "I had no idea. All this time." A flashing light on Darren's wrist computer interrupted them. "Proximity alert? Someone's coming." They scrambled to gather what evidence they could, downloading files and grabbing physical records as they raced back to the entrance. Voices echoed from outside. "Check for signs of intrusion. No one gets in or out." Darren and Alara exchanged grim looks. Their escape route was cut off, and with Imperial forces closing in, the mission to expose the truth had only just begun. Their odds of survival, however, were plummeting by the second. Desperate measures, Darren's mind raced as Imperial forces closed in on their position. He glanced at Alara, her face a mask of purpose behind her helmet visor. "We need a distraction," he whispered, scanning the dimly lit archive. His eyes landed on an ancient power conduit running along the wall. "Cover me." As Alara kept watch, Darren pried open an access panel and began rerouting circuits. Sparks flew from his makeshift sabotage. "Intruders!" a voice bellowed from outside. "Breach the entrance." The grinding of metal on metal filled the air as the massive door began to open. Darren stepped back, praying his handiwork would hold. With a thunderous crack, the power conduit exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Alarms blared as emergency systems engaged, plunging the archive into darkness, save for the eerie glow of emergency lighting. "Now!" Darren grabbed Alara's arm, guiding her through the chaos. They sprinted past disoriented guards, ducking energy blasts that sizzled past their heads. Reaching their ship, Darren practically threw Alara inside before leaping into the pilot seat. The Zephyr's engines roared to life as Imperial fighters scrambled to intercept. Darren pushed the craft to its limits, weaving through a hail of weapons fire as they broke atmosphere. "We can't go back to Imperialis," Alara said, her voice tight with urgency. "Where now?" Darren's heart pounded as he plotted a course. "We split up. I have a plan, but it's risky. I need you to stay hidden while I infiltrate Cargon Quintus." Alara's eyes widened. "The prison colony? That's suicide!" "It's our only chance to build a real resistance," Darren countered, his voice resolute. "There are rebel leaders in prison there. If we can free them and expose the truth, we might have a fighting chance." Hours later, Darren stood before a mirror in the Zephyr's cramped quarters, barely recognizing himself. The Rayan uniform felt stiff and alien against his skin, but the transformation was complete. Commander Phrasen stared back at him, a perfect facsimile of Imperial authority. On the desolate surface of Nexus Prime, Darren clasped Alara's hand one last time before boarding the prison transport. "Stay safe," he murmured. "I'll contact you when I can." The shuttle's engines thrummed to life, carrying Darren toward the most dangerous mission of his life. As Cargon Quintus loomed into view, a massive orbital fortress jam-packed with weapon emplacements, Darren steeled himself for what lay ahead. Security checkpoints blurred together as Darren relied on his fabricated credentials and newfound knowledge of Rian protocol. Each successful deception brought him closer to the heart of the complex. In the central command center, Darren's fingers flew over consoles as he initiated his carefully orchestrated diversion. Alarms blared, drawing guards away from the high security cells. Reactor core instability detected, an automated voice droned. All non-essential personnel, evacuate immediately. Darren strode purposefully toward the detention block, datapad in hand. The few remaining guards snapped to attention at the sight of his commander insignia. "Emergency inspection," he barked. "Open all cells in Block Theta." As force fields flickered and died, confused prisoners emerged. Darren locked eyes with a towering reptilian figure, Boro, the infamous Vorn rebel leader. "Who are you?" Boro growled, muscles tensing for a fight. Darren raised his hand slowly, deactivating his Rian disguise. "My name is Darren. I'm here to free you, and to show you the truth about the Empire you've been fighting." He activated the datapad, projecting holographic images of the evidence they'd gathered. Boro's eyes widened as centuries of lies unraveled before him. "By the moons," another rebel leader whispered. It was all a fabrication. Darren nodded grimly. "The battle god myth, the divine right of the Emperor, all of it designed to keep your people subjugated. But together, we can bring it all crashing down." Boro's scaled fist clenched and unclenched as he processed the revelation. "And why should we trust you, human? Because I'm offering you something no one else has, the chance to truly be free." Darren's words hung in the air as the assembled rebels exchanged wary glances. The fragile alliance teetered on a knife's edge. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. "Commander, step away from the prisoners." Darren whirled to see Prax, the guard he thought he'd turned, leveling a weapon at him. The Rian's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Did you really think you could fool us, human?" Prax sneered. "Admiral Zavos sends his regards." Alarms blared as the sound of approaching troops echoed through the corridors. Darren's mind raced, searching for a way out of this trap. But as Prax's finger tightened on the trigger, he realized his options were rapidly dwindling. The reluctant rebel leader, Darren's muscles tensed as Prax's finger inched towards the trigger. Time seemed to slow to a crawl in that fleeting moment. With nothing left to lose, Darren made his choice. He lunged forward, abandoning the facade of Commander Phrasen, and his body slammed into Prax, sending them both crashing to the floor. The weapon clattered away as they grappled, a tangle of limbs and desperate strikes. Prax's eyes widened in shock as Darren's fist connected with the guard's jaw. "You're human!" he spat, disbelief and pain contorting his features. "Surprise!" Darren growled, using his momentum to knock Prax unconscious with a final, well-placed blow. The detention block erupted into chaos. Boro, seizing the opportunity, barreled into the nearest guard, his massive scaled form easily overpowering the Rian. With a snarl of triumph, Boro snatched up the fallen weapon. "Freedom!" His guttural roar echoed through the cell block, galvanizing the other prisoners into action. Darren rolled away from Prax, narrowly avoiding a wild swing from another guard. Scrambling to his feet, he surveyed the mayhem as prisoners overwhelmed their captors, fueled by desperation and newfound hope. "This way," Darren shouted, gesturing towards the command hub. "We take control. We take the station." He sprinted down the corridor, Boro and a handful of rebels close behind. Alarms blared as they fought their way through pockets of resistance. Darren's stolen uniform granted them precious seconds of confusion, just enough to gain the upper hand. The command hub's blast doors loomed before them. Darren's fingers flew over the access panel, blood pounding in his ears. A satisfying hiss signaled their success as the massive doors slid open. Inside, panic-stricken technicians reached for weapons, but Boro's massive form filled the doorway, and his commandeered blaster made short work of any resistance. Within minutes, the hub was theirs. Darren slid into the central console, overriding security protocols. On screens throughout the station, cell doors slid open, and the uprising began in earnest. The faces of astonished prisoners turned to steely resolve as they took up arms, their long-awaited rebellion finally within reach. A familiar face materialized on the main view screen, Kratok, the cunning insectoid rebel strategist. His multifaceted eyes gleamed with newfound purpose. "I see our unexpected savior has been busy," Kratok chittered, his voice crackling over the comms. "What's the plan, human?" Darren's mind raced, piecing together the intelligence from their data heist. "We strike hard and fast. Multiple systems, key targets, shipyards, supply depots, communications relays. We'll cripple their ability to respond. Boro nodded grimly. My warriors stand ready. Point us at the enemy. As rebel leaders coordinated their forces, Darren's thoughts turned to Alara. He keyed in the secure frequency they'd established. Zephyr, this is Darren. Are you receiving? Static crackled for a moment, then Ilara's voice cut through. Darren, thank the stars! What's happening? He quickly outlined the situation. We need a critical strike. There's an orbital command station, Karamon. It controls Rian fleets across a dozen sectors. If we take it out, say no more, Ilara interrupted. I'm on my way. Darren's chest tightened. Ilara, it's a suicide mission. A moment of silence passed before she responded. I know, but it's our best chance, isn't it? He couldn't argue. As much as it pained him, she was right. Be careful, he managed, his voice thick with emotion. You too, she replied softly, before the communication cut off. Darren turned back to the bustling command center, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The pieces were in motion now. They had to capitalize on their momentum. Boro, he called out. How do you feel about paying a visit to Karamon? The Vorn's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a grin. I thought you'd never ask. As rebel cells across the sector sprang into action, Darren allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The real war had only just begun. The station rocked violently as Imperial forces launched a counterattack. Alarms blared throughout the command center. Incoming transmission, a rebel technician shouted. It's Admiral Zavos. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the sneering face of the Rian admiral. Did you really think your pitiful uprising would succeed? Zavos snarled. I've been 3 steps ahead of you this entire time. Darren's blood ran cold as the camera panned to reveal a bound and gagged Ilara, struggling against her captors. Zavos grabbed her roughly by the hair, his cruel smile widening. You have 1 hour to surrender, or the princess dies. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Boro roared in frustration, smashing a nearby console. We cannot give in to this coward's demands. Darren's mind raced. We won't, he said, his voice steely with determination. Kratok, can you track that transmission? The insectoid rebel's antennae twitched as he manipulated the controls. Affirmative. The signal originated from the Imperial Palace on Imperialis. Then that's where we're going, Darren declared, turning to Boro. Gather your best warriors. We're mounting a rescue mission. Within minutes, a sleek stealth craft detached from Kargon Quintus, carrying Darren, Boro, and a hand-picked team of rebel commandos. As they hurtled toward Imperialis, Darren pored over schematics of the palace, searching for any weakness they could exploit. The imposing structure loomed before them as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Boro growled, How do we get inside? Darren's eyes narrowed. We don't. We make our own entrance. The stealth craft's weapon systems came online, targeting a specific section of the palace's ornate facade. A barrage of precision strikes tore through the building's defenses, creating a smoldering breach. As klaxons wailed and Imperial troops scrambled to respond, Darren led the assault team through the ragged hole. They fought their way deeper into the palace, dispatching guards and following the trail of Zavos's transmission. A familiar voice crackled over their comms. Darren, I've infiltrated the palace security network, Kratok announced. Zavos is moving towards the lower levels with the princess. He's heading for— Wait, that can't be right. What is it? Darren demanded, ducking behind cover as energy bolts sizzled past. There's a hidden sub-level, not on any official plans, Kratok replied. Some kind of hangar. Darren's instincts screamed danger. He's trying to escape. We need to cut him off. Direct us to the nearest access point. Following Kratok's instructions, they fought their way to a concealed elevator shaft. As they descended into the bowels of the palace, the air grew thick with tension. The door slid open, revealing a cavernous underground hangar. At its center stood a massive warship, sleek and bristling with weaponry. Emblazoned on its hull was a single word, Purger. And there, at the foot of the boarding ramp, stood Admiral Zavos. He held Ilara at gunpoint, a cruel smile twisting his features. So predictable, Zavos sneered. I knew you'd come charging to the rescue. Now, You get to watch as I depart with my prize, and your rebellion crumbles to dust." Darren raised his weapon, but Zavos pressed the muzzle of his blaster harder against Alara's temple. Ah, he chided. "One wrong move, and the princess dies." Time seemed to slow as Darren weighed his options. The lives of his team, the fate of the rebellion, and Alara's safety all hung in the balance. His finger hovered over the trigger, knowing that whatever he chose next would change everything. The final gambit, Darren's finger tightened on the trigger, and in that split second, Alara's eyes locked with his. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Trusting her, Darren fired. The blast struck Zavos' shoulder, spinning him away from Alara. She reacted instantly, driving her elbow into his solar plexus, forcing him to release his grip on her. Before Zavos could recover, Boro's massive form barreled forward, tackling the Admiral to the ground with a thunderous roar. "Alara, go!" Darren shouted, laying down cover fire as Imperial troops poured into the hangar. Alara sprinted towards him, dodging energy bolts that flew past her. They had to stop Zavos' ship before it could escape. Once inside, Darren and Alara raced up the boarding ramp, sealing it behind them. The ship's interior was a maze of sleek corridors and pulsing tech. Darren's fingers flew over the consoles as he attempted to disable the Purger's launch sequence. A bone-rattling explosion rocked the hangar. Through the viewports, they saw Boro and the rebel commandos retreating, pursued by Imperial forces. "We're out of time," Alara said, sliding into the pilot's seat. "Hold on." The Purger's engines roared to life. They blasted out of the underground hangar, tearing through levels of the Imperial Palace. Debris rained down as they emerged into Imperialis' night sky. Alarms blared as a familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Darren, we've got company," Kretak warned, just as a massive Rian armada materialized from hyperspace, filling the view screen with an overwhelming array of warships. "By the stars," Alara breathed. "It's the entire Imperial fleet." A new transmission cut through the chaos. A stern-faced Rian appeared, his uniform adorned with the highest military honors. "This is Supreme Admiral Malar," he intoned. "All rebel forces surrender immediately or face total annihilation." Darren's mind raced. Their hard-won victory was slipping away as Malar's fleet opened fire, ravaging the planet's surface. He knew their next move would determine the fate of the rebellion and the galaxy itself. "Alara," Darren said, a plan forming in his mind. "Set a course for the Dominus." Her eyes widened. "Malar's flagship? Are you insane?" "Probably," Darren admitted, a grim smile playing on his lips. "But it's our only shot." The Purger accelerated towards the heart of the Imperial Armada. Darren prayed their audacious gambit would pay off. The real battle was just beginning. The Purger streaked through space, weaving between massive Imperial warships. Laser fire erupted around them as Alara expertly piloted the stolen vessel towards the looming bulk of the Dominus.